Hi, and welcome back. In this lecture, we'll cover 4 types of personas that are often used in the service design environment. Let's take a look at each one of them. Basically, you have personas that are goal-oriented, role-based, engaging, or fictional. Each persona type has a distinctive characteristic, which will give you and your design team that extra edge when defining personas. Let's start with the goal-oriented persona. This persona cuts straight to the nitty-gritty. It focuses on what does my typical user want to do with my product. The objective of this persona is to examine the process and workflow that your persona would prefer to utilize in order to achieve their objectives. Within this type of persona, you need to include 3 elements. The first element is that you have the persona itself, where you describe what the story is about, attitudes, the motivations, the goals, and the pain points. The second element is that there is the scenario. This element defines when, where, and how the story of the persona takes place. The scenario is in fact the narrative that describes how the persona behaves as a sequence of events. And third is the persona's goals. This element defines what the persona wants or needs to fulfill. The goal is the motivation of why the persona is taking action. The scenario ends when the goal is reached. Now that was the goal-oriented persona. Let's now move on to the role-based persona. The defining characteristic of this type of persona is that it is extremely data-driven. This type is more used for personas that will represent internal users instead of external ones. Basically, your starting point to create such a persona is the role that the persona plays inside the organization. Think of a digital marketeer, for instance. Having a good understanding of the digital marketeer's role will help us to make more informed design decisions. The elements that you should include are the purpose of the persona role. So a role can be a profession, like a digital marketeer, for instance. Next, you should also provide a description of how the product we are designing could help your persona in their current role. Then there is the description of the professional objectives linked to that role. Our digital marketeer will probably want to generate leads and send them to sales, for instance. And then lastly, you should map all the other roles that are impacted by the role of your persona. Like I mentioned, sales will probably be impacted by our digital marketeer, but communication probably as well, as they will need to prepare commercial material. So that sums up the role-based persona. Let's now move to the engaging persona. This is personally my go-to persona, and it's because it's the most complete. This type of persona aims to increase the engagement of the design team as much as possible. This in turn will push them to design an experience that better serves the persona. We try to create a persona that's as close as possible to a real customer. We do this by examining the emotions of the user, their psychology, backgrounds, and make them relevant tasks at hand. It can incorporate both goal and role-directed personas. It also forces the designers to move away from seeing the customer as a stereotype, which is hard to identify with. And finally, it provides a more realistic version of the persona by creating a realistic description in the form of a rounded character with a believable backstory. You can even go as far as creating a 2D or 3D model of your persona. So, we have now arrived at the 4th and final type of persona, named the fictional persona. The fictional persona does not emerge from any user research, unlike the other personas. It instead emerges from the experience of the UX design team. It requires the team to make assumptions based upon past interactions with the user base and products to deliver a picture of what a typical user could look like. These personas will likely be deeply flawed, but can serve as an initial sketch of user needs. They allow for early involvement with your users in the UX design process, but they should not be trusted as a guide for your development of products or services later on. And there you have it. These are the main persona types. Up to you to pick the right one. As I mentioned, I prefer to use the role-based persona, but that's just a preference. In the next lecture, we will go over the 6 steps to create your own persona. See you there. Bye.